Steeped in the stoic from the start, via his southern Texas cotton farm childhood, Tom Yeager eventually degenerated into an urban bohemian, raconteur in training, work mechanic, and aspirant to the quality arts of sober society, which he believes are yodeling, tap dancing, and storytelling. These days, from Houston's freewheeling Montrose neighborhood, Tom confesses his personal narratives with poetic potholes, yielding life's lessons with surprising twists, turns, and conclusions. Please welcome the Bard of Montrose, Tom Yeager. Woohoo!
Thank you, Marie.
You're welcome.
And thank you to all the Fox Valiants for your attendance, be you ladies or be you gents. As children, we grow straight and strong, heeding the lessons of our fathers. As adults, we can grow wise and well, revisiting those same lessons. The title of this true story is Fear and the Right Thing, and I'll tell it as I recall it. Oh, in my youth, well, I'll tell you the chief mischief then of myself was sleuthing around my family farm. Along the dry banks of the Rio called Frio, on the sparse rural plains around our home. A few country miles from the edge of the boondocks, a little city where it was, little town where it was that I grew up, a little town is where I grew up. On this occasion, it was a beautiful October day in Texas, and that's where and when this story begins. I was a fearless child. Too fearless, in fact, for self-safety, my father figured. So he reckoned he'd remedy my imperfection with education. It was the first day of his big annual hunting expedition for the fall farm infestation of wild city folk, meaning city folk came to hunt with him, not he hunt them. And Dad inaugurated that imbroglio by gathering together the guys and the gals around his pickup for what he said was a demonstration. I shan't show in the city. Now, I think Dad meant to say the city, but before I could giggle, he turned to me and said, "Son, this day you'll learn what fear is." And he gave to me the box seat for his big show, hoisted me atop the toolbox that ran over the truck bed. But all eyes fell to the center of that truck bed, which contained a menacing burlap sack that pulsed and morphed into different shapes. Dad announced that the exhibition would commence once I had lifted my legs, which I accomplished with great haste and growing horror. He grabbed a hoe and he poked at and poked at. Dad poked at that sack until the sack burst open and out streamed snakes, rattlesnakes. And they streamed out and streamed out. Snakes streamed out that sack until the truck flowed over with so many snakes. Now, in fairness to my family, I have to interject the inner memory of my older brother. For he would attest that our father's inventory of snakes that day totaled all the way up to 2. But that didn't matter to those hunters, because when city hunters see any number of snakes, they find the feeling of their fullest fear. Well, snakes rattled and hissed, and the snakes coiled and struck, and the snakes made a menace and a mayhem to the awe and respect of all the spectators there. Eventually, those snakes all grew so bored and calmer. So Dad grabbed his boot. Energetically, that's what he threw to boost their clamor. Now, again, I'm going to interrupt to interject my inner memory of Dad's old boot, because it was not your typical shiny, pointed-toed, multicolored, ostentatiously stitched cowboy model. For no toes in my family have ever been compressed, contorted, or cajoled into compaction by cowboy footwear. No, sir. Father was a farmer. So he wore an honest, round-toed, rough leather, working man's boot. But that didn't matter to those snakes, because when contra snakes see any kind of boot, they strut the strategy of their strongest strike. The larger snake seized the opportunity by stepping forward and striking that boot just as it landed. One fang penetrating the rough leather, the other sliding along the outside, oozing yellow-green venom. Now, folks, don't scoff at my scholarship. That day I learned what fear is. Well, as the curtain fell on that fine performance, snakes all bowed and the hunters were all ushered out to their hunting stations. Dad turned to me again and said, "Son, regarding what you witnessed, such circus foolery suits city folkery. But duty beckons a country-bred gentleman. He knows that when it comes to poisoning a snake, for the safety of all, it's up to him to be brave and do the right thing." He grabbed a shovel, and though he was not French, he brought that shovel down with an awful guillotine force, sending those serpents to the viper afterlife with chops to their necks. That is, if snakes have necks. Well, the carnage was complete, but the lesson time lingered as Dad next launched his seminar on poetry. He said, "Repeat after me. Red touching yellow can kill a fella. Red touching black, venom lack." That's the coral snake identification form every naturalist knows. Dad said it could save my life. So you know, I learned it well. Overall, I'd say Dad was pleased with my progress, but not too pleased really that from that day forward, I specialized in hunting coral snakes. Well, how else could my life be saved from coral snakes if I wasn't around coral snakes? I turned over every rock and log on that farm seeking those coral snakes. On every Cub Scout and later Boy Scout field trip of my youth, I wielded a dragnet for coral snakes. I've spent my adult lifetime engaged in safety-minded, family-oriented recreational hiking and camping in almost every Texas state park, scrutinizing all for coral snakes. Now, of this, you can be certain. The chronicle of my life will eventually reveal that over the decades, I have had run-ins with many a serpent and viper. But I logged in today to tell the Fox Valley that it's those rural run-ins with those coral snakes that just tops my list of things that never happened. Not one time did I run into a coral snake in the wilds of Texas. However, well, just last fall, on a little stroll, I stepped right over what appeared to be nature's fancy-ass folk art lodged in the expansion crack of a sidewalk. But on closer examination, it proved to be a young, colorful snake. But it struggled feebly and hopelessly for Apparently, so sadly, inconveniently, when confined by that snake-sized crevice so unnaturally straight, the little bloke couldn't stoke any locomotion. It was less in length than my lower leg is long and so cute that I reached down to pick it up by its wee little tail. When suddenly that coral snake poem came to mind for the first time in years. Red touching yellow can kill a fella. Well, red bands were surrounded by yellow bands, and the snake, every one, this snake could kill a fella. Red touching black, venom lack. Red didn't touch black anywhere. It did not lack. This snake had plenty of venom. It was indeed the first coral snake I had ever seen outside of a zoo. And coral snakes are the most poisonous snakes in North America. I froze with fear. However, duty beckoned this country-bred gentleman. I knew that when it came to this poisonous snake, for the safety of all, it was up to me to be brave and do the right thing. But I didn't have a shovel. So I grabbed a stick. And I'm not French, but I brought that stick down, feeling all the guilt of the world, and lifted that snake very gently from the crack to its safety. Once unincarcerated by that linear snake jail, that snake picked out a pleasing pose in the satisfying shape of an S, traditional for snakes. It sniffed at me with a flick of its tongue, nodded its head, then went on about its snaky business. For in its youth, well, I'll tell you, the chief mischief now of my snake is slithering around my favorite park, along the wet banks of the bayou called Buffalo. Oh, our dense urban realm offers lark. There's a few city blocks from the center of this boom town. Big city where it is, I grow old. A big city is where I grow old. On this occasion, it was another beautiful October day in Texas. And that's where and when this story ends.
Woo! Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Delightful.
Thank you.
Great story, Tom. Well told. That was from Elizabeth. Oh my goodness. I must admit you had me at the burlap snake, the burlap sacks pulsing. It's like, oh, that fear. Oh my goodness. But be brave and do the right thing. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you.